Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey, here with Father Boniface. And Father, based upon our last conversation and something that you said, I guess about a month ago now, has been kind of mixing in me in a way that I didn't fully grasp until you said it and then I listened to it in the editing. And that was when the priest says, and I'm going to need you to clarify the exact words because you say it at every mass, accept the offering at my hands at the beginning of the consecration. I always thought it was literally only about the gifts of the bread and wine that were presented, that you take up to the altar during the mass. That was always my interpretation. And during that episode, again, it was a month or so ago now, you told us that no, that's actually every element of the congregation. That's our whole being and essence. And that has a massive statement and has taken a while to kind of absorb into my thought process and going through that. And then in the last episode, as you were talking about how Jesus fully loved all of us to the point of even accepting his own death, those two elements mixing together is mind-blowing and powerful all at the same time. And I wanted it to really have its own episode to dwell upon. That's what is meant when you say, accept these sacrifice at my hands. And I wanted to dive into that because you said it as just a given that everyone should know. And it has been sitting on me this time, like, wow, like there's really a lot to it in a lot of different ways. So I want you to take the floor here and expound upon that.
Yeah, you can explore the logic behind that process. If we are, as we talked about in the last episode, if we are made to be able to love as Christ loves, at the heart of love is sacrifice. There's no love without sacrifice. So we have to learn how to sacrifice, which always means sacrificing today or sacrificing something personal for something later for someone else. And so it's we sacrifice for God's sake. That's a way that we worship him. And we sacrifice for others. We lay down certain goods. Who knows, maybe you're already starting your college funds. We think ahead to what others will need. We set aside money and time and energy and affection, and all of those things are sacrifice. It's turning something that we could use to our own ends for the sake of someone else. And so how do we learn to sacrifice in the best way? Well, what would the best way be, first of all? Well, the best way would be that the way that God himself sacrifices when he becomes one of us. The way that Jesus offers sacrifice would be the model, the standard that all of us should follow. And so just like when you're putting a puzzle together, you consult the picture periodically, like, what's it supposed to look like? What's this thing supposed to look like? So it's really important for us to have that kind of end result, like, what's this thing supposed to look like? And that's where we have this staggering example that we receive in scripture, and even understanding all the dimensions of that requires a bit of unpacking. What is the cross exactly, and how does that apply to my life and your life? Anyway, we see what love looks like when it is totally given. It looks crucified. So it's one thing to hold up. So I need to be able to look at the picture, and stand there. I need to visit Calvary on a regular basis to remind myself, what's the goal again? What am I aiming at? What's the picture look like when it's done? So that's part of it. But then I also need help. It's like, just like any other process. I mean, does it look like this, Daddy? Does it look like this? How does this go? Can you help me with this? And what do you do with a child? It's like I remember one of the first art projects I did. Well, that's not true. One of the first kind of lasting, meaningful art projects I did. I had a friend whose mother fired ceramics. So she would make ceramic objects from molds and then painted them. And I was invited to paint a little nativity set and I wanted to give it to my parents as a gift. And I painted it, and along the way I said, how does this look? Oh yeah, I like that. Maybe a little bit of blue there. Oh, good. Okay. So we have an iterative process with the master. And I hold up my little version of it. She was excellent, and then even I got to the end and she said, just leave the eyes undone. They're really hard to do and they're really important. Let me help you with that, or let me do that for you. So that's how an iterative process works, by which if I had continued doing ceramics, eventually I would have had a little workshop on how to do eyes, and I would do the whole thing myself, and I would pick all of my own colors, and I would take over the process and maybe fire my own ceramics. So we hand off processes iteratively with the master. And that's also what's happening at Mass. I provide my sacrifice. What is that sacrifice? Well, that's my life. That's everything that I do. And I bring the parts of myself there that I want to kind of hold up. How am I doing? This is what I've got. And Jesus says, that's good. I'll take that. That's a little bread and a little wine, and we'll add that. We'll paint the eyes in. We'll perfect it. We'll make it what it ought to be, what it is at its best, and we'll offer it as an act of love for the Father and an act of mediation, intercession for the world. So that's what we're continually doing. There's I'm thinking of it as sort of like a machine that you put the ingredients in and turn the crank, and it commingles my sacrifice and his in the same machine, we could say. And what comes out is his sacrifice, perfected love. But even more personally than that, again, I keep learning, I keep receiving the grace, I keep doing it better and better as that process unfolds. So yeah, that's really what the Mass is doing for us. It's holding up the model, it's showing us the perfect sacrifice, and it's also giving us the chance to learn how to sacrifice by including ours with his. And then steadily, as we commingle those and then we receive from his, we continue to be transformed by his grace to offer a more and more perfect sacrifice, that is to say, to love more and more perfectly in everything that we do.
Yeah, that's it simultaneously, in at least my experience, is inviting it in deeper, but also showing a worth to what it is that you do at the time outside of Mass, and thinking of what is it that I'm actually going to be doing and sacrificing when I return to the next Mass. Like what is this that we're doing? And there is a little bit of a trap of making sure everything is productive. But thankfully, I've talked to you enough times to know that relationships aren't based upon production. So there is that part that's going there. And just the reality is that the notion that we always can do better is present. And this thought has been kind of weighing upon me. It goes along these lines of, yes, obviously Jesus poured himself out in the cross in the way that no one else ever has. But he also did it with the knowledge of what was going to happen from it. He knew all of the results from his suffering and what it would be. For us in this world, not having the ability of being God and knowing everything, we don't know what the outcomes of our sufferings are. And there are sometimes that it seems like I'm just suffering for the sake of suffering. Well, why? And there are some times when, as you said, in the form of preparing for the future, I can see the direct benefit of this foregoing something now to have a better future, whether it be for myself or someone else or what have you. It's part of business planning. So there's a lot of things that go in that element. So I wanted to basically ask about that. Does the notion of knowing something's going to come out of this sacrifice or suffering, whatever the right term is today, mitigate it? Does it make it less powerful or meaningful or anything along those lines?
I missed just the first part of that sentence. Does what make it more powerful?
Well, does the fact that we know we're sacrificing now for a tangible solution, just as, like I said, as Jesus knew he was going to die to remove our sins, like he knew that. And just as I might be putting money away for, my son's college account, I know that's what I'm doing it for. It's still a sacrifice today, and I'd still rather have that money and spend it today and use it on something fun. So it is a sacrifice, but does the fact that I know he's going to get something out of it mitigate the element of the giving?
No, in some way we really need that. I don't know. I guess Jesus shows us both examples. I mean, as you say, he heads towards Calvary with a determination to save everyone. Like, that matters. So this is one of the insights of Viktor Frankl, and led to the whole discipline of logotherapy, was to have we need a sufficient why, we need a sufficient reason to endure anyhow, to make our way through the trials, the pain, the suffering of life. And so a reason, meaning, keeps us alive. Literally, you watch people die. He said in the concentration camp, I think he was in Auschwitz, he said people died before they died. They gave up. They lost their reason. They lost their reason for living. They lost the meaning before they actually, and then whatever form death would take was inevitable. But when they had a reason, they found their way through the hardest situations, endured terrible suffering, had a reason to make it through. So yeah, we certainly do need a reason. There is also something about, as far as that reason can have a little bit of taint around self. So the problem is that we are sometimes motivated by reasons which are self-serving, and I want to see the outcome. It's like the person who donates so that their name will be on the brick. It's like, okay, well, you donated to something, you don't get the whole benefit out of it. It's worth a lot more than your name on the brick. But if that's really a condition, well, there's something that probably needs to be purified in that. And so it's, let's say, 90% gratuitous, 10% self-serving. And so Jesus also tells us we need to do things where the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. We also need to do things that we don't know the outcome, and we don't know exactly what the benefit is. We just do the right thing because it's the right thing, and we trust that God is working those things out. And that's where Pope Francis has this magnificent passage in The Joy of the Gospel, paragraph 279, and he says, ministry is not like a business transaction where we can count the number of people and seats. He said, it is also a mystery that we do good and it circles the globe like a vital force, sometimes affecting someone on the other side of the world whom we will never know and never meet. And so that is there's a kind of purification of whatever self can get involved in it that's really important. So yes, we need a reason. Yes, we need to see outcomes. Yes, we need to have some purpose and direction and things like that. We also need to allow our offering to be free enough that it could get applied in some other way, that it could end up in some other place that we don't realize. It's sort of like you have obviously a goal for your children. What happens when they're college? They don't want their college fund, or God forbid something happens to them and they can't use it. And those are like the willingness to say, yeah, well, then it was still good to save the money. It was the right thing to do. I did it not only for that purpose. I did it because it's right. I imagined it would go towards that purpose. That's the kind of mixture of purpose-driven and then sort of gratuitous offering that we need to learn to make.
Yeah, that's first of all, I appreciate that answer, because it's it's an important question. I think it's a question that I have pondered myself quite a bit, is that, you know, when you don't know what's going to happen, it is more of a risk inherently. And, you know, we can look at the term suffering in a lot of different ways. Loss is certainly part of it. There's, you know, emotional loss, you know, a relationship didn't go the way you want. There's obviously economic loss. That one's really easy to show. There's prestige, power, whatever. I mean, you can see it all in different ways. And I love the way that you say that. It's not necessarily wrong to give to something and get your name on a brick. That's not necessarily wrong. But at the other hand, if you're the person who's trying to collect the money and you know that if we put people's names on the bricks, we'll get a whole lot more money, that's not a problem either. So having it be as a gift to say, hey, you know, I really don't want my name on the brick. Well, you know what, you're giving enough. This is just what we're doing for everyone who's giving X amount. So I appreciate that you don't want us to buy the brick for you, but this isn't necessarily just about you now. If you do this, 3 other people who really want their name on the brick are also going to buy it. So we need to have enough for the road. And that's a dynamic relationship between the person who's trying to collect the money for whatever their purpose is, and knowing that this is something that will help, even if it's not exactly the way that you want it. And I guess this goes back to something we talk about a lot, is that there is no one tight and clean answer. You got to look at this from the broader perspective and see all of the many forces at play. As you said, it's a mystery of doing well for each other. You're helping people in so many different ways that you didn't know. And going back to last episode, if you're going down a journey of trying to become better at love, inherently in that, it's not going to always be perfect. Even though the goal is perfect love, the journey in and of itself is going to have some things that we're not. And that is expected. It's beyond okay. It's the way it has to be. And, you know, that's something that we just have to recognize and take internally. I'm sure that in fact, I know because it's in the Bible, there are people who were told from Jesus exactly what to do and how to do it, and they didn't understand. And there were some that weren't willing to listen. So, Father, I want to give you a chance to conclude this episode here.
And what you just said is also part of how beautiful this process is. So Jesus comes as the embodiment of mercy. And a way of translating the word sin is missing the mark. So when you say it's not going to be perfect, we're going to be a little off. Maybe we're going to be a lot off. So we're going to try to relatively quickly correct the a lot off problems. But then as we go forward, we're going to be a little off. We all know this in every relationship. We miss the mark. We do one thing, we should have done another, should have paid more attention, a lot of different things. But Jesus has that corrective built in. That's what's happening in the Mass. We give him the good, the bad, and the ugly. Give him everything. And that's what happens in confession. When I know what it is that was off, I confess that, and I receive the transforming grace of that. And I keep course correcting. I keep learning. I keep looking at the model. I keep giving what I have to him, and he keeps perfecting it and helping me to do a little bit better. He keeps helping me to make the adjustments. And so as we enter into that process, it's enough to enter into it, and he'll take us the whole way down the path.
Excellent. And what great knowledge to take into the rest of the week. So we thank you all for being with us, and we will be with you again next week.